Now, Vijay Prashad is the director of Tri-Continental. He's the editor of Leftward Books and in Canny Books and chief reporter at Globe Trotter. Vijay Prashad joins us again now. Vijay, welcome back to the show. Well, talk about Tri-Continental. There's at least 3 continents on fire right now. How do you see the world situation with your well-trained eye?
Well, George, it's great to see you, and it's great to see you in good spirits, in fighting spirits. Keep that fire going. The world is in pain, George. It's in pain from one end to the other because countries like the United States, which have had a long history of being colonial powers, Europeans as their subordinate allies, just cannot tolerate the fact that the rest of the world wants to be treated as equals. I mean, they just can't imagine themselves as equals. The Israelis cannot imagine themselves as equal to the Palestinians. After all, George, they still play in the European Football League and they sing in Eurovision. This fantasy of superiority has to be knocked down. The world is in pain because of this old colonial ambition, which needs to be ended forthwith. People in Europe and the United States need to realize that they are just people like the rest of us, and they need to behave with a little more humility toward the rest of the world and not use their military power to either intimidate or destroy us.
Amen to all of that. Let's start with Nepal. What happened there and what will happen next in your view?
Your assessment is correct. I mean, there is a serious problem, but also let's be a little charitable to Nepal. Nepal was a military monarchical dictatorship in our own lifetime until the late 1990s. The people of Nepal had to fight. The democratic and left forces had to fight great sacrifices to build a republic. They fought to build a constitution in 2015, only 10 years ago. People who've been to Nepal need to talk to others and tell them the terrain is difficult. There's torrential rainfall for much of the year. There are high mountains. It's very difficult to overcome poverty for a poor country whose major export is vegetable oil and who needs to import almost everything else through India, which is in many ways a hostile country to Nepal's ambitions. It was difficult in these past 10 years for governments to advance any agenda. And I would also like to say that the left squandered an opportunity in 2017 when it won 3/4 of the National Assembly and could have really pushed a dynamic left agenda, but you can't put a left agenda on the table. India closes the borders, suffocates the country. In many ways, there was foreign interference, George, but it was not all the United States. It's India as well, including the far-right BJP, which governs the Uttar Pradesh province, which borders southern Nepal, where the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath, has played a very direct role in motivating and inciting the pro-monarchy forces, which started this protest movement earlier this year. They want to bring the king back. They want to create a Hindu monarchy inside Nepal. That was the beginning of this protest movement. And I know that the Western press is now going to say that, well, that was a pro-monarchy movement. This one now is Gen Z. I don't buy it. Why is it that in this Gen Z protest, they attacked the homes of all politicians except the monarchy party? Why was the monarchy party not touched? There is actual direct evidence to show that the monarchy party's leader said, I am with these protesters, I am all for them, and so on. I mean, there was a role played by India in this, certainly. It is true that this government in Nepal, a center-right government, a unity government led by Mr. Oli, in a way, a former communist in alliance with the Nepali Congress, a center-right government did two stupid things, tried to ban social media and then opened fire on the politicians. Well, that exacerbated the situation. As I say to people, George, don't blame the ants for coming into your kitchen if you haven't kept your kitchen clean. Because if the ants come in, they will bring the rats. And if the rats come in, you don't know who's coming next. Well, certainly the kitchen was not kept clean. The ants did enter, and now the rats are inside. I don't know where this is going to go. Nobody knows. Right now, the military is calling the shots in the country. This is, in a way, good. India will be smiling because the Nepali military is very close to India. But I also don't want to overstate this other issue, George, which is that it's not so much a China-US battle in Nepal. It's very much a US-India battle. India and the United States have been jockeying for control over Nepal over the last 10 years. India has felt that the United States has asserted itself too much through the Millennium Challenge Corporation. Again, adding in another little wrinkle to the story, in 2014, it was confirmed that on the other side of the Himalayas, but still in Nepal's border in the province of Mustang, they discovered a 10-kilometer by 3-kilometer high-quality uranium deposit. This is right on the border with China. The United States very, very unhappy if this uranium is allowed to be developed and sold to China. So lots of moving pieces. We should come back in a few weeks and have a conversation again when the dust has cleared, when the smoke has settled, and we begin to see really how the chess pieces are falling.
Of course, the dust has not settled in Doha. Indeed, you could argue that the dust has continued to rise. My analysis is that Trump must have known, did know. Not a flock of birds could cross Qatar without the Odeid air base and its multiple radar and electronic warfare sophistication, knowing not only what it was, but where it was coming from, who it belonged to, and where it was built. So I have no doubts at all that Trump gave a green light to this perfidious, treacherous attack on his own ally and friend. Do you share that view?
Look, frankly, George, this is a shame for the Arab nation. You know, what has happened to the Arab nation that the United States is being permitted to allow Syrian airspace to fire missiles into another Arab country, that is Qatar. In other words, the United States has basically walked all over Arab dignity here. What has happened to the old traditions of Arab nationalism, Pan-Arabism, of Nasserism, you know, when Gamal Abdel Nasser threw out the monarchy in Egypt in 1952? Where are the residues of that sensibility? This is a shame. I mean, the fact that the Qataris can't stand up to defend their own sovereignty is a scandal. I mean, the people of Qatar, of course, mostly members of the royal family and those who benefit from Qatari largesse, should be a little ashamed of how they've allowed, you know, their idea of themselves as, let's put it like this, George, people will maybe laugh at this, the London of the Middle East. You remember that London in the 19th century was the sanctuary for radicals. It's where Karl Marx and others went to seek sanctuary. They wrote their great books, they organized in London and so on. There was an idea of the Magna Carta, of habeas corpus. You know, it was not supposed to be an authoritarian place. Well, in a sense, Qatar operated as the post office box of all kinds of organizations. I have interviewed people from Hamas there. I'm sure you have. I have met the Taliban representatives in Qatar. I'm sure you have. I mean, that's where people went as a neutral place to talk to some of the representatives of these organizations, which are otherwise banned by Western governments. But now this attack, this breaks in a way, the quote unquote rules of the rules-based order that has been in place in the Arab world. But really, there should be demonstrations in the streets of Cairo. There should be demonstrations in the streets of Damascus saying that this is a shame on the Arab land. Just when Hamas's negotiators are trying to negotiate the Palestinian people out of a genocide, out of a man-made, Israeli-made famine, at that point, you strike at the Hamas negotiating team. This is another way in which the Israelis are conducting the politicide, the death of Palestinian politics. They have Marwan Barghouti in prison for over 23 years. He's a leader of Fatah in prison for over 23 years. Recently, they tried to humiliate him. Actually, he came out the better of that gangster from the Israeli government. And Ahmad al-Sadat, the leader of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, in prison for 23 years, just 1 month less than Marwan Barghouti. The Israelis basically are trying to ensure that the Palestinians don't have a politics. You and I remember there was a time before Oslo when Yasser Arafat united the Palestinian people. He spoke for the Palestinian people. Since Arafat's death, the Israelis have not allowed another Arafat to emerge. They will not permit Marwan Barghouti to be that figure. They will not permit Ahmad al-Sadat to be that figure, or Khalida Jarrah. They are trying to disorient the Palestinians, and this is working in a way. I'm sorry to say, during this genocide, it's been mostly non-Palestinians speaking for the Palestinians. We don't have that unifying figure like Yasser Arafat. And I feel the loss personally. I feel the loss of a major Palestinian figure standing up and speaking for Palestine in the name of Palestine.
You and me both. Let's complete the tricontinental tour we've just had by coming home to Europe, in my case. The fate of the French Republic hangs in the balance this week. Macron's government has fallen. He's appointed the 5th Prime Minister in 2 years. He dare not call presidential elections, for humiliating defeat would be the inevitable result. Keir Starmer is this evening hanging by a thread. These two great war leaders who were threatening war against Russia, putting sanction after sanction on Russia, and driving the idea of European soldiers being sent to peril in the Ukraine, are now, as I say, perhaps by the end of this week, will both of them no longer be with us. It's enough to make a horse laugh, isn't it?
Well, look, firstly, I don't even know if they're with us now. They are so mediocre as people that if Keir Starmer walked into the room, I wouldn't even notice him. I don't think I would notice Emmanuel Macron if he was standing behind me. I would not feel his presence. I mean, I'm going to say a couple of rude things, George, and what I just said is not rude enough. One of the rude things I want to say is that the decline of French culture is extraordinary. Where are the French intellectuals that we remember? Where is the Jean-Paul Sartre of today? Where are the moral voices? Where are the great politicians? Okay, you don't believe that de Gaulle had an idea that I would probably agree with, but the man was a lion. He could command a certain vision of France. What vision does Emmanuel Macron have? He's puny. He doesn't have a vision, not even a boy's vision of the world. These people are really quite mediocre. I mean, if we go across to Germany, we've gone from Hegel to Merz, and before that, Schulz. These people are, they make me long for the return of Angela Merkel. At least you'd have somebody there with a brain, you'd have somebody there with a view of the world, with an intellectual capacity to understand the churning of the world order. Keir Starmer fashions himself as a lawyer. I mean, what is this? To listen to him speak in the House of Commons, George, is embarrassing. I used to enjoy, watching highlights from the House of Commons. George Galloway MP would stand up, the lion of the house would regale people and humiliate the prime minister. Well, that was worth watching. Tony Benn could get up and really give it to them. He could sock it to them. Again, whatever, one minor differences you might have, these were real politicians. What do you have now? On the one side, you used to have Rishi Sunak. I mean, for God's sake, man, I wouldn't know what to give him as a grade if he was my student. And Keir Starmer, as I say, mediocre doesn't even describe these people. So you said they may be gone in a week. They're already gone. These countries, George, they need to have a new kind of renaissance. They need a real cultural, introspection, need to rethink who are we? What is England? What is the United Kingdom? What is France today? What is its project in the world? Just been kicked out, humiliated in the Sahel region of Africa by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Unable to deal with that. They're walking away, tail between their legs saying, well, we decided to leave. No, you didn't. You were kicked out. You were humiliated. You are being humiliated in Ukraine. You just can't admit it. Mediocrities, George. There is no Hegel in Europe today. And I'm not saying that out of glee. I wish there was, to school people to have a good philosophical understanding of the world today. It's just not there, and I'm sorry for it.